One of the most satisfying achievements we had versus GPT was when we taught our agent to say, I don't know, because GPT is trained to please. It will generate something, you know? Whereas it was actually a lot of effort to teach the model that you have to know when you don't know something. And you need to be able to say, I don't have an answer to this based on the information I've got, so I'm just gonna have to escalate you now. So this is the first pillar of getting more precision and accuracy in the responses of our agents.
So today I'm really excited to bring you Tugce Bulut, who was the founder of StreetBees over a decade ago, which raised over 72 million in VC funding to bring conversational market research to large consumer brands. But this episode is all about her latest venture, Eloquent AI. Currently coming out of stealth mode when we had this conversation. We get into all things agentic AI, why they're tackling the hardest industries first, like financial services and banking and healthcare, where compliance is a real challenge. She has deep experience in this industry, some really interesting views on why multi-agent architectures are the future if you want to get reliable and accurate agents that can talk to customers and deal with mission critical use cases. She has a lot to say about outcomes-based pricing in AI, why it's a top-down sale, how it's different than traditional software, what conversational UX and agentic UX even looks like in the future. A ton of really interesting stuff from a very smart and experienced founder in this one. Enjoy. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Chief AI Officer. Today I'm excited to bring you Tugce Bulut, also known as T. And Tugce, thanks so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, can you give everyone a quick intro to your background and what you're currently up to?
Absolutely, but happy to. So I started my first business called StreetBees in London about now 9 years ago. And this is pre-LLM world. We were basically building knowledge graphs using NLP technology to turn large-scale consumer data in unstructured form into a flow of insights in real time for the world's largest consumer companies. We grew that company from nothing to having, the multi-million contracts with companies like Unilever's, Coca-Cola's, PepsiCo's, etc. And in 2022, just after ChatGPT got launched, we became one of the first providers of LLM solutions in the UK. We did a partnership with OpenAI and, we learned a lot from that process. I exited that business in 2023. And frankly, I wasn't thinking that I would go in and go through the whole process, whole journey again. But I got way too excited about the possibilities of large language models and the solutions they give us. This time with Eloquent AI, my new business, we are based out of San Francisco, and we are more focusing this time on infrastructure of making human quality AI conversations possible.
Nice. So thanks for that background. I'm really excited to dig into that because right before we started recording, you shared a little bit about what you're doing in the agentic AI space and specifically addressing some of the limitations of agents in terms of, reliability, really building for those critical customer facing use cases. So we're going to get into that in the conversation. But first, what's your vision for Eloquent AI generally? Maybe has it changed as you've been building?
Absolutely, Ben. So what I realized is during the dot-com years, some of you who are old enough to remember, we were going through an absolute paradigm shift, right? I remember back in the time, I was a strategy consultant, and we used to get a lot of requests from our customers for their digital strategy. There is no such thing as anymore. You are digital as a company. And we are going through a similar, if not bigger revolution now with all the companies we see around us making transformation to being AI native. So how is that going to happen? And I started looking around, trying lots of agents, conversations in different websites, apps, customer services. They are just not that good, are they? As researchers in the AI space, we know what it is capable of, but when we look around at the implementation, we are not seeing stellar examples where it's delightful to talk to the agent, your problems are resolved, it understands what you are saying. So I realized there is a gap here between what is possible with this technology and harnessing and controlling to that technology to a level that enterprises can rely on and move forward with. Our vision is to become the new operating system for the AI native businesses as we power their conversations with their customers.
Yeah, I think it's been such an interesting evolution where early NLP was so focused on intent and, like sentiment and really
Yeah.
these very scripted conversations in terms of conversational agents. And now LLMs have come along and it went really far the other way and things got out of control. You had all of these horror stories of LLM agents offering things that didn't exist to customers or committing to things that they shouldn't be committing to. And that caused a pullback from enterprises as well. Clearly, there's a need for some sort of middle ground between those things or a completely new way of thinking about the architecture. How do you think about that? What is your unique approach? Like, what is your insight into how you should be building for enterprise in this space?
That's a great question. And maybe, you made me think a really interesting example as I was listening to you. And I think you are really putting your finger on a very interesting divide here between a deterministic world of software to a stochastic world of LLMs, where we have to learn to work with probabilities, basically. And we still have to control the results that comes out of that stochastic world. And it's possible to do that. But we are kind of stuck in between right now. Like we can't write a simple test, like we used to do for software. And if it's correct once, it's always correct, right? In that particular scenario. So things have changed in that sense. And what I see is if you look at the old school companies in this space, let's start with, for example, customer service ones, your intercoms, ADA, the Zendesks, Live Person, you count it, right? There's so many. They are built on NLP. They are chatbots. And today they want to bring in LLMs, but they are not really set up to be able to actually internalize the capabilities of large language models in that way. And that was exactly our starting point. If none of these companies did not exist, and if you were building the entire concept of customer conversations AI native from scratch, how would you envision it? How would you actually do it? That was really our starting point. It was really entertaining the other day. I was in the website of Tiffany & Co. And this was just pre-Christmas. I'm trying to get some last minute purchases of some presents. And I honestly forgot about actually buying the present because I was so entertained that the bot, it wasn't an AI agent, it was a chat bot. There's a big difference. And it sounded like the bot was drunk. The answers from the bot were so dazed and confused that at some point it's just an entertaining conversation for me. So that's why, we actually started building this with a very different mindset. Would it be helpful if I tell a little bit about the structure and, the infrastructure we are bringing into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a few things there that I would love to expand on as well. I think Zendesk and Intercom are giants in this space, and they've gotten a lot of press for their adoption of agentic, or just LLM-based systems and for their outcome-based pricing, right? I think some are charging on customer conversations, some are charging on resolved tickets. But I'd love to really get into what you mentioned in terms of they're building on top of an old stack, and you're building in a completely new way. What is that new way, and what do you think the opportunities are?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I'll give an example. We recently implemented for an insurance customer who switched from Intercom to us. And it was quite interesting to do those side-by-side comparisons, like where the difference occurs. But let's start from the basics, right? I can reduce the infrastructure change to really three important points. The first one is we talked about probabilistic nature of the agent responses. If I'm an enterprise, I can't roll the dice, right? You can change the answer every time. You don't have to show something scripted. That's okay. As long as that information is fully grounded in my sources and it's not coming from somewhere in the internet. And also, it's correct, right? It's accurate information. We cannot rely on then a single agent to be able to achieve that. And even if you have a fantastic reasoning engine, either in-house or you are using a really good one, a single agent, even with a great reasoning engine, cannot achieve accuracy level that you are looking for. The first thing we have done is we work with more than 7, in some cases 11 different agents working all together in conjunction in a very compressed time frame, because the response needs to be prepared under a couple of seconds, basically in a couple of seconds. And these agents do a couple of things. For example, a very common mistake you would see in this old generation ones, the customer asks a question, right? The bot relies on that single question, even if it's unclear, and tries to answer, jumps the gun and tries to answer. Very first thing you need to do is build a clarification agent. If it's ambiguous, if it's not clear, it's much better actually for the agent to ask back, like humans would do, right? Like we would do in a conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite get, what you mean by exactly that. Let's dig into that before I prepare my answer. Another one we use very commonly is a verification agent. The answer is grabbed, retrieved. Now, a completely like a teacher who are scoring the homework of the other agent looks back in the entire audit trail of how that answer was generated and marks the homework and says that, yep, this is good. This passes the threshold this enterprise company set for me. So I can actually go ahead and generate this answer. Or it says, this is under the threshold. I'm going to have to escalate this now to a human. One of the most satisfying achievements we had versus GPT was when we taught our agent to say, I don't know. Because GPT is trained to please. It will generate something, Whereas it was actually a lot of effort to teach the model that you have to know when you don't know something. And you need to be able to say, I don't have an answer to this based on the information I've got, so I'm just going to have to escalate you now. So this is the first pillar of getting more precision and accuracy in the responses of our agents.
I love that. That was actually going to be a follow-up question I had because of the stochastic, the nature of these systems. You can approximate, you can get closer to 100%, but it doesn't matter how many layers of that you're going to have. You're never going to get to 100%. So it sounds like you're solving that by embedding that in the model, like know what you don't know and only answer when you're 100% accurate. I love that. And it's obviously, the first step is also, I'm assuming you're doing RAG, like on the company's knowledge base and then building in extra layers. What was the most difficult element of kind of architecting that system? Like, what do the orchestration layers look like? I'd love to understand some of the challenges you had when building that.
Yeah, I mean, one of your main challenges is time. You are racing against the time. So if you gave me all the time in the world, we can get pretty close to 100%, right? But this all has to happen in parallel so that the response can be generated within a time frame that human who is conversing with the agent is going to tolerate. So we had to compress quite a lot how many agents we can layer, and especially if they need to work sequentially and we can't do the processing parallel. The other thing is, in enterprise reality, cost. You have to make sure you are not wasting tokens while you are double checking and triple checking the answers. If the cost gets to a level that you might as well escalate to a human, it no longer makes sense. You touched on outcome-based pricing earlier, and I think, in my opinion, that's the only way to work in the agent world. Because if the conversation in the end has to get escalated to a human the company will have to pay for that. So why should they pay twice for an unsuccessful agent who couldn't even resolve the issue and then pay again for the human? So to me, that makes no sense. You should align the incentives and only pay for the situations where the agent actually succeeded. So that brought us to how do we optimize the cost? And that's when we started training our own in-house models, because with domain-specific large language models, our in-house model is called Oratio, and our very first model we released is for financial services and regulated industries. The more you can put these learnings already into your model, and your model knows your operating system, the role of your validation agent, the role of your clarification agent, you are less and less focusing on the tokens and that one single generation, but you are more relying on your model's capability. So that was definitely a very important step for us to be able to optimize the cost. Just to give you an example, at the moment, our cost base is 1 to 4. We are 4 times cheaper than any other agent on a success-based pricing basis. To get there, we had to do a lot of iterations, a lot of teachings to our model. Whereas if we simply shifted to something like using either, a Mistral model or Cohere or, GPT model, we would have to be more expensive simply. So this is also quite important factor when you are working with enterprises.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of very promising results from more domain-specific models being built, right? Just the sheer size of them makes them much more efficient and usually more effective at achieving the outcome. Touching on that pricing aspect, or maybe both capabilities and pricing. One, this is a space with a lot of hype, a lot of things going on in the market. Do customers understand the difference between what you're presenting in terms of this multi-agent system versus some of the other tools out there? And then on the pricing side, outcome-based pricing is great, but it's also highly variable, right? And enterprises can get a bit scared when they're buying something where they don't know how the cost is going to scale, right? How do you address both of those things? I'd love to understand a bit what conversations with customers are like.
Such great question. So let's start from the first one. It's such a good question because as technologists, we get overly excited about our technology, but always the example is I can drive a Tesla car without knowing how the entire EV technology is working. We don't need everyone to get into the depth of, your multi-agent structure. How are you optimizing your clarification agent? We are very happy to provide that. How we actually show the results is, as I said, we run side-by-side tests on Intercom, Zendesk, and Eloquent AI, or any other system, Salesforce, Agentforce, which is I think 8 times more expensive than us. And we just run side-by-side tests, and then we tell them, ask your most difficult questions, right? That you think most agents will fail. And then you will see, you don't need to see what's under the hood. You will see the answer. We are going to escalate 50% less. And on the answers we get it, let's see if we are going to be able to find a wrong answer. So I think that should all that matters. When the customers are looking at solutions, you just got to compare the results and see that, are you getting accurate answers? Do you know when you don't have the answer? And what percentage you still end up escalating, basically. That's mostly what our discussions are around. The second question is, usually what we do is an ROI calculation, right? To help them with that. So if you prefer just to pay for conversations, basically you can multiply the number of conversations you have a unit price, that's your price, right? But what we would encourage you to do is to do a full pricing, including your human cost. Okay, right? So you just calculate the whole budget, basically. The reality is, when we charge you every time we successfully resolve something, that means you don't need to incur the human cost. So in no world we can come above that budget once you include humans, because if you are paying a human agent at least say $4 for a conversation, and our cost with you is 70 cents, right? Every time we win and we successfully resolve the conversation, you are actually getting a 330 return on that conversation that did not go to human. So I think it's much better approach to come up with like a humans in the loop total budget, right? And then set a target for what is it that you want to get to. I'm sure we are going to come later. One of the most important questions here is that the learning starts after you launch an AI agent. It constantly improves. So again, one of the most satisfying moments for us is in month 1, we start with 60% resolutions. In month 2, that goes to 70%. In a couple of months, that goes to 95%. And to be able to, track that trajectory of how that's increasing is one of the most exciting things about this space.
Yeah, I think that's great because clear ROI case always helps, and obviously figuring out how to frame that outcome is really key, and managing expectations, right? It sounds like for your process, the proof really is in the POC, and so figuring out how to manage expectations within that POC of, okay, you might get a certain accuracy, but you will expect over the course of, your expansion, the model's going to learn, it's going to get better and better. It's much better to start on that ground than to say, we're going to be 90% out of the gate and then have disappointment, which is what we're seeing a lot happen in the space as well.
100%. But just for clarity, let's separate resolution versus accuracy. What we say is that from day one, we will be 100%
Right.
accurate. That we can't obviously compromise on, but you're absolutely right. When it comes to resolution, you may start with 50, 60%. Bear in mind, most chatbots today has 15 to 20%. So from day one, you will already get quite a good uplift. But some of our customers who's been working with us for over 6 months now are now up to 95%. And it changes your entire team structure. It changes the way you think about customer conversations. And we are not talking about just customer service. Our actually biggest success area is in sales, right? Let's say I'm a beauty clinic or I have high-end beauty products and someone is going to buy like $1,000 laser for their face, right? They've got a lot of questions. So do you want to get a doctor on the phone talking them through that? Or do you want a regulated, compliant agent 24/7 answering all these questions, taking the order, shipping the product in the end, right? So that's what I meant at the very beginning. It's an operating system. Like when we start actually imagining how the businesses can operate in the future, it goes way beyond customer service.
Yeah, I can completely agree. One of the challenges with that I'm seeing through conversations I'm having is that product-led growth is difficult in this space, right? It's very typically a top-down sale. It's a very sales-led motion because you need deep embedding in an enterprise's systems. You need access to their knowledge base. You need all of these things. That means someone in some random department can't just start trying your product. Like you have to be embedded in those systems and run this POC. Is that your experience? And how is that affecting how you're thinking about going to market as you launch out of stealth?
I, of course, wish we could give this, out of the box to many more people and help them improve it quickly. It is a very important decision. Most conversations we undertake are mission critical. They have regulations. There's compliance that needs to be tested. And I think that's where the whole system from the research of my co-founder, who is a professor of machine learning, that we learned is around simulators and evaluations. I know in the last couple of weeks, evals have become a huge topic in the Valley, but actually there's years of research already been done in that space. Typically, us innovators don't like testing too much. You build something, you just want to release it, right? But in reality, that is the secret sauce in achieving precision and accuracy and control. And that has also become, coming back to your question, our go-to-market. If you have an agent already, which most people have, what we would offer you is to try and use our simulators and evals for free, for a period, for a trial, just to test your existing agent. Why? Because our simulators automatically can look at the common questions in your space, start chatting with your agent in a simulated basis, thousands and thousands of conversations. And then our evals measure the success. What are those important criteria? Accuracy of the information, audit trail of the information, can it be traced back? Completeness of the response, quality of the conversation. Did I get frustrated? Did I have to repeat my questions again and again? We have dozens of evals like this, depending on the sector we can choose. And very quickly we can show you your areas for improvements, basically, right? And if the result from that evals report is that your accuracy is 20%, which is very often what we find, it encourages you to try an AI native system rather than relying on your old school customer support who just added a bit of AI on top now.
Yeah, I love that because you're creating urgency immediately off the back of the eval because no one wants a system that's 20% accurate in that space. And urgency is typically one of the hardest things to get in B2B SaaS, right? Like there's so many things they could be spending on. There's a lot of hype in the market. So that is a great mechanism that I'm sure many others can learn from. As you think about bringing this into market, right? You've been in stealth, you're building with partners. What for you is kind of the top priority for growth, and what do you think the biggest hurdle is going to be as you bring it to market?
Good question. So the sector-wise, we started with finance, insurance, debt collectors, banking. Why? Because we knew it was a very challenging problem to solve. And we had very interesting conversations where people were complaining about compliance issues, lack of accuracy, not being able to rely. And we felt like this is a good challenge for us to take on. It's fun. Let's see if we can get something that these massive organizations can rely on to roll out, basically. That will continue to be focused. So we will continue to grow with the finance sector, but we then extended it to your atypical non-tech players. Everyone has a website. You don't need to have an engineering team, right? In the same way, everyone should have a fantastic AI agent, which is 24/7. They don't need to have an in-house engineering team for that. So we started working with some beauty clinics, products, where there were actually two interesting challenges with that. When you are working with a team, there's literally like zero tech team on the other side. That means no API. That means you can't rely on any sort of like integration from their side. We still have to get the user information for personalization of the conversation. So we started investing a lot on no-code integrations, right? So you just tell us, where is your purchase stock, which CRM system you are using, where are you managing your customer payments and deliveries. We integrate with all of that, no code on your side. You dump in your knowledge base. We have a transformation layer that takes that knowledge base. You don't need to know what is relevant for the agent. We can actually transform that, extract the entities, create the ontology for your business. And like literally overnight, there is a knowledge base and the graph, the RAG graph system generated basically for your business. I find that challenge also particularly, interesting because powering non-tech companies with such kind of like cutting edge technology is also very satisfying.
Yeah, and to your point, you get over a lot of the technology sale hurdles that you would typically have, right? And you can go straight to the business case, like delivering value. If you don't have to build separate integrations, are you using agentic systems to extract data as well, or how is that working?
Yeah, so this is probably getting a little bit more into the secret sources of the business.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's leave it at that high level. So we have our own in-house agent called Clara. And what Clara does is basically she looks at all the data that you provided, including your websites. It might be your Instagram post. It might be your YouTube videos, right? Wherever your information is. It doesn't have to be old school PDF documents, basically. And Clara sorts that out. And she basically looks through everything, grabs what she needs, restructures it. And this is the biggest difference. Even when we wrote FAQs, we wrote it for humans to understand. That's not optimized for the functioning of an agent. So someone going to do the transformation in between. That's what Clara does for us.
Yeah, again, I love that. And I think that's something that many businesses should and can learn from, which is this idea of getting time to value, if you can create systems like this that accelerate that time to value and really dismantle all the hurdles to a typical deployment, you're going to get much further, much faster. Have you found, is selling and deploying AI different from traditional software, and how so?
I did not think about that actually. Let me have a think. It's a good question. I find it actually really similar in a lot of ways because with Street Bees, we were also way ahead of the market. At the time, we said 10 years ago, we are going to use text and images to generate insights and forecasting for products, right? And everyone was like, what are you talking about? That's not going to be statistically significant. Knowledge graphs don't work like that. How are you going to use images? You know what I mean, right? And then the whole spatial AI developed together with us, like NLP world came to a whole another level, and eventually we had LLMs. I had the same problems. We would go and meet the chief statistics officer of Unilever, and he would have some really great questions, but that comes from the world of statistics, whereas we are in a new paradigm. So part of our job is explaining people, okay, what is a stochastic structure? How simulators can still measure probabilistically the chances of error and what that means, right? So that basically that same education and training, I find very similar, whether it's SaaS or AI agents. And then it's like same good tech practices. You gotta monitor, improve, evaluate. I think they're also quite similar in a lot of senses.
Yeah, I think you're right. The hurdle that some people have getting over the non-deterministic nature of it, especially when so much legacy software has been built on that, and these systems have been testable. As you said, these new systems are also you can evaluate them, but it's done in a very different way, and so it's very interesting to see how much of a part of the go-to-market for your business that will be. I've never heard someone say that they find the compliance challenges in finance and banking exciting. So you might be a first on this podcast. But given how you're approaching the problem, I can see why it's exciting for you, right? Because you're approaching this differently. And so the traditional hurdles that used to be there are actually opportunities for you as a business. So that's very, very exciting.
And also, I come from the other angle that imagine you are the consumer who is experiencing it. Who enjoys giving a call to Vodafone or BT or Barclays? I mean, let's solve this problem, right? Let's actually give consumers something that is more delightful to engage with.
Yeah, I think if you can help people avoid the call that they go into a waiting list and spend ages waiting, or they have to deal with a really horrible chatbot experience that doesn't answer their question, then there is a lot of upside for you. Looking forward, what do you think conversational AI, service agents, sales agents, all the things that you're working on, how is that going to evolve over the next 3 to 5 years?
I really do hope that now with evals becoming a lot more important, many more companies are going to start actually adopting them rather than just going rogue and releasing things without, proper testing. That's going to give us much more we're going to see many more rollouts, right? That's the most important thing. So when we actually show up in any, go to booking.com's website or Airbnb, why should I search anymore? Or a flight search. I don't want to search. Search was for a world where we had to speak the language of the computers. So there were boxes, forms. I had to tick boxes and write the things in the right place. Now with LLMs, the computer speaks our language, right? We have a new base for our communication. So I expect from anything like, your Expedias to Kayaks to Booking.coms to Airbnbs is going to be a platform where I just go and chat and you do what I need and you send me the results in an email, basically. So I think we're going to see a lot of those changes, even the grocery shopping, right? Why should I go through the pages and pages, try to find what I want? Why can't I just give you a list and then you're done, basically? Just get it shipped to me. So that's why we are obviously very excited about the prospects of becoming the infrastructure for this operating system as the world is going through this transformation from a website, app-centric human-computer interaction to a conversation-centric interaction.
Yeah, I've heard some very interesting things around what a world looks like when agents are interacting with agents and what layers are going on in between, like how do we then optimize websites for agents that are looking for information or trying to take actions on them? I think it's going to be a very interesting few years in that space. On your point about conversational UX, I do think that's an interesting one because it is so intuitive for a lot of people, but there is also like a blank slate issue sometimes. I think there are reasons why we've had decades of kind of product UX development and workflows and different ways of interacting with products. Do you think conversational is really going to eat everything in terms of how you interact with this? Or is there maybe a middle ground somewhere where there's somehow a combination of the two types?
You gotta entice and excite, right? It's like, of course, you gotta find a way of doing that. For example, if I wanna book a trip, of course I wanna see beautiful photos of the city I'm going to, as well as the house I'm going to rent, for sure. It's more the UX of getting there can be with conversational commands, with a context-aware agent. So agent will be seeing also what I'm seeing. Agent will know where the buttons are. And if I'm telling the agent that, oh, look, these houses are great, but I would rather stay in Pacific Heights and I want definitely a flat with much bigger windows, right? I don't want to deal with how to find that on your website. That's not my job. That's your job. I'm just telling you what I want.
Yeah.
Show it to me. But will I still see the photos? Of course. We will still need the interface to show the enticing features. If I'm like, let's say I need a dress for a Halloween party in black. I don't want to go through thousands and thousands of dresses on the website of a, aggregator shopping website. Instead, I would rather chat with my personal stylist who knows my style, who knows my price range, and still show me the dresses in the end you picked for me, but don't make me go through thousands of them.
Yeah. So almost a shift in kind of goal-based interactions versus process-based interactions with these companies, right? Which I think is a huge shift. What do you see, in that future? Obviously, we've had AI regulation in Europe. In the US, we had an executive order that recently got rescinded. How do you see evolving AI regulations affecting how you can grow in this market?
So there are two important things to consider. Most of the sectors we operate in already has regulation. And you have to be compliant. It doesn't matter you are bringing in AI agents into that. Whatever the company and their human employees were compliant with, so does AI agents. So first of all, it's not like we are starting from a place where there is no regulation, right? There is already regulation on everything we do, and we get into that space. So let's just first of all become compliant with those. When it comes to AI-specific regulation, I think the probably two most important areas are how the data is being used, right? So for us, it was a very important principle from the get-go. No customer data whatsoever gets used to train our models. You cannot operate in the enterprise world without having that principle, right? Your data belongs to you. We just service you with your data. We are not going to use that, right? And I think any regulation that makes that, obvious, and if you are using people's data to train models, you have to inform them, you have to get their consent. I think that should be a no-brainer, and it should be imposed with regulation. I think there's a second part, which is probably not as relevant for us, but if you have information in the public space, like publishers, creators, songwriters, and all of your information is on the internet. There's nothing you can do about it. And it is being used for other people to make millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. Then we are going to need to see something happening about that. I'm not sure what's right or wrong on that, because we definitely want the technology to continue to progress. Anything that stops us from making good models cannot be a good regulation. It can't be in the interest of humanity. But at the same time, we need to consider the factors of fairness, and everyone should be able to get a part of this pie, if they are contributing to the ultimate outcome.
Yeah, I think those are two very specific ways in which there is a need for some type of regulation. What that will look like is still hard to tell, particularly here in the US. I could talk about this forever, Tugce, but let's get into our very quick lightning round to wrap things up. What's the AI tool that you personally use the most?
I think in the last couple of days, it's Granola AI. It takes meeting notes for me, and it's fantastic. It's now my companion for all my meetings.
Amazing. I've actually had someone else on this show mention that. So I've seen a lot of meeting note takers. So that one must be a good one. I will check it out. Do you have any specific resources that you love for staying up to date on what's going on in this industry?
Not one source that jumps to my mind. I don't think so, but I think I follow over hundreds of different articles. And honestly, X is the right platform. The people we follow on X, you just find out about everything within minutes.
Yeah. And do you have any phrases or ideas that recently really stuck with you?
I think I'm gonna misquote this, but I'll say it anyway because it's so important. Whatever you can't measure, you cannot improve. This is just every day we live with that. And I just recently saw the actual original quote again. And I was like, this is just so true for the world of AI agents. If you can't measure, you can't improve.
Yeah, that's particularly given your focus on evaluation. I can see why that one stuck with you. Tugce, that's, I've really enjoyed this. I think our listeners will have learned a lot about AI agents and how you can do things in a much more holistic and hopefully more accurate way. Before we wrap up, if people want to follow your work, where should they go?
The best place would be LinkedIn, Tugce Bulut on LinkedIn, or on X, also Tugce Bulut.
Amazing. Well, to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. I learned a lot. Tugce, thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure, Ben. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you.